Okay. And we are on TikTok too.
Always. If you would like the old lady out, just let me know.
I like this place.
You pushing it out of the way.
Good morning. You got a new hair.
Hang on one second.
You look so handsome. Should we have our mic in? His
Hi.
looks cool.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Better now that we see you.
You got a new hairdo.
I think I just found a hairbrush.
Oh, okay. All right. I like it.
It's
Long time listener, first time caller. Not really,
Yeah.
but long time listener, long time caller.
Huge fan.
How-
Always your number one fan, obviously.
Right. So Warris Bokhari, MD.
Dr. Warris Bokhari here today.
CEO of Claimable.
If you guys saw the docuseries Overturned,
That's him. That's him. Humanitarian, great guy and newer friend for us, but I feel like it's only been about a decade since we've known each other, even though it's been 9 months.
Julie refers to you as her best friend.
That might happen.
Feelings mutual. Feelings.
I mean,
feelings.
I'll just see myself out of this throuple.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
No, I mean, look, I will say that like it's been like a really fast. When did we meet? Like I think what?
March
April?
4th.
March,
It happened
March,
to be
right.
my birthday. I know that because
It was the greatest gift you could have given her.
I was in an emergency room at 10:30 that night, texting you saying, you know what, there's been a little dust up. I'm gonna be picking you up at 10:30, not 8:30. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we'd spoken like perhaps like a week before, I think, because of Twitter. I found you on Twitter. So like the
Yes.
origin story of all of this was we had done some work with an arthritis group, like a nonprofit, and I'll leave them nameless, to really find out more about arthritis denials. And we put something out there, and like literally 0 people responded. And so I started getting like concerned that maybe denials didn't really exist and weren't really a problem. And so I went to Twitter, which is like a place I hadn't actually been for quite some time. And then I was like, who are these people who are taking a flamethrower to, I think it was Cigna at the time, or yeah. And I was like, this is like hilarious. So then maybe it was like before that, but I found an email. I emailed, I never heard back because I don't think anyone actually responded to that email inbox. And then I ended up calling the practice and speaking to front desk, and then you and I got on the phone. And then it was kind of like, and then you were like, "Hey, buddy, you need to come out here and see what's really happening." And hence then meeting in March, and so began a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, because we all have a couple things in common. We're all patients and we've all had denied and delayed care. And I was actually recovering from a back surgery on February 26th.
Right.
And so, which I am insured by Anthem in a fully funded plan. And I ended up having to pay out of pocket for my MRIs, and my late husband had to do the peer-to-peer, and they still wanted to give me a knee MRI. It's like, that's not the problem. It's my lumbar spine. Like, the incompetence is so thick in these insurance companies. It's horrid. So that's how we met. And Warris has been to St. Louis a number of times. The most memorable one was doing an appeals clinic. So do you want to tell people about that?
Yeah. And I'm being harassed by 2 dogs, by the way, just in case anybody wonders.
You hear the squeaker in the back? It's mine, and I'm so sorry.
I actually can't hear it. But I will say that, so the appeals clinic, part of building the company Claimable, or one challenge you have when you build technology companies is that you might find that like the experience on the front end of like really understanding user experience and like what actually happens to people, it's really hard to kind of like translate into code. And so then you can end up with an engineering experience that doesn't feel like it's connected to the experience of every individual. And so like the appeals clinic was a really great way of like breaking through probably like 6 months of like working on company culture by getting every single member of the company to come out and like get to meet patients and get to hear people's stories about what's actually happening to them. And that was, you know, for us, like really special. It was like a really huge opportunity for like every single person, like dealing with like, I guess what I affectionately term as the vagaries of healthcare, which is like the human element. It's complex, it's messy, people like break down in tears on you. And that's hard to like put into a text box, right?
Yeah.
And so it changed a lot of how we thought about like the product that we built. And it changed a lot of the way that we thought about like denials as well. Like I think I thought about them as being like fairly like monolithic. And then from working with you both, it's like, actually they're approved, but yet they're still denied. So, and we kind of found these kind of weird flavors of denials where it's actually like an approval, but it's the wrong type of approval because they're approved on the specialty pharmacy side, but not on the med benefit side, which is just kind of this like weird game of cups that the insurers play so they can scoop all of the revenue into their bottom line, which is awesome for them, but not necessarily for anybody else. So like it was a huge education for me too. So that, I mean, on all of those fronts, like it was like incredibly beneficial. And then we also had like Wendell Potter come out and Ash Gilbertson, who Ash and I have known each other, and stop me if I'm talking too much, but Ash and I have known each other for uh, God, coming up on 10 years now. We met over dinner in London because he was actually doing a job with my wife, a photography job with my wife. And we were just instant friends. And we, we bonded over this idea of like capturing the human inside of healthcare who too often gets lost behind all the jargon, the symptoms, the signs, it is kind of interesting. It kind of takes me back to like being in my mid-20s at medical school. And I got to like do this with like you guys and with Ash, but this is something I've wanted to do for like basically 20 years, which is like really like connect to the human element of like what it means to live with a chronic disease. And that comes from like, it's born of like two experiences, like maybe three actually. One, I grew up with parents who both had chronic disease and they both died, but they died getting all of the medically necessary care they needed, right? And then I moved to a place where um, you might die because you can't get the medically necessary care you need, and we can come back to that in a
Yep.
bit. But that seems like a huge inequity. And I remember there's this other memory from medical school that like really strikes me. It was like 2 days before finals. This is like 2007, I want to say. And we're at UCLH, which is a UCL hospital in central London. And there's a guy behind the curtain having a cardiac arrest. And there are a bunch of medical students who are like really pissed off that this guy's dying because they wanted to examine him because they're worried he was going to be a case that came up in our final exam. And I'm like, first of all, there's a human behind that curtain. So like think about that. And the second thing is like if he is dead, there's a very good chance he's not coming up in finals. But like you're missing the wood for the trees that like these are individual people. And so like even in medical training, we learn to like disconnect the humanity from the pathology and physiology. And that to me is like a big problem. And I think it permeates. And then coming to this country, it's just everywhere. And then we've built an entire insurance system, which is utterly disconnected from like any experience of any reasonable human, either working to provide patients care, which is you both, or to anyone who needs the care. And so, and that's just a system that can't stand. So
Right. Well, I am so drawn to what you're doing and your team. My experience of the appeals clinic was feeling like I was 20 again, right? I was like energized. We were all
That
working.
was the hardest week of my
Right.
life. I cried every single day while you guys went to the patients'
Yeah.
houses and interviewed. So I would just
But for me, I was energized because I love smart people. And you have like such an amazing team with Alicia and Zach and
Yeah, they're
Ben
amazing
and
humans.
Ash and Wendell.
We
Like,
made it toward the end of the day. I was happy because we would all get dinner together and it was like, okay, all of this craziness is worth it because we get to meet back together.
yeah, to me, I just love working on hard things that end well. Okay. So that was the whole vibe of Claimable. We do
Yeah,
hard things and we get results. And
yeah.
so I will, I have no medical background whatsoever, other than I've been in this office for 9 years. But what I can tell you for sure is whatever medicine the clinicians decide the patient is going to be on, that's the right medicine for that patient. I don't need to know anything else from my team about that. I'll take it from here. And I think we're really good at this, but Claimable's better and it gets faster results. And you taught me the patient appeal is where it matters. That's the
I
secret
mean,
sauce.
I think that was one of like the key, learnings or key things that I learned going through this. I mean, the funny thing is that like most people don't know they can appeal and they feel like it's hopeless. But yet, if you were to appeal just on the broad statistics, you'd have a 50% chance of winning. But yet, like basically 0.1% of people ever appeal. So it's a very strange disconnect. And the reason is because it's really hard. And I've met a lot of, those patients in that week. And if they had to like go to the post office and get shouted at by, whoever's like behind the desk because they couldn't find an address fast enough, or, figure out how to fax something in 2024, which by the way is not trivial.
It's
Like
not nothing.
it's actually not nothing in 2024. It's actually like quite hard. So like there are all of these like weird barriers that are set up between like a patient and doing and sending an appeal. I also remember like one of the first ones we did, I think it was like Aetna had some like nonsense on their form that required like Steve Bark's tax ID number.
Yep, right
Um,
there.
a- and it's like, how would a patient ever know this? And it turns out that's like not required. It's just like a nice to have. And like frankly, who cares? But it's enough to dissuade and discourage a patient who feels like they need to cover the color inside the lines. There are a couple of cases that look, I mean, like you're not going to win them all, and that's like authentic to acknowledge. I think there are a couple of cases that like really stuck with me that we couldn't get overturned. There was a lady who was in the clinic room with her disabled husband. And, he'd had a terrible fall, lost a leg. He was a veteran. She was so dignified, like trying to hold it all together. And they had some like insane cost tiering, provision within their insurance plan, which basically meant she was approved, but she couldn't afford the medication because she was on like a crappy, I think
Medicare disadvantage.
she was on a crappy Medicare Advantage plan that
Mhm.
basically meant that she would go bankrupt if she got care. And I remember her like dignified, like front breaking and her just like being in tears. And I was just like, I feel awful for you and we'll appeal. I'm not sure we can win on requesting a tiering exception. And I don't think we won. But
Well,
like,
didn't you also send it to the copay assistance for her? Like you guys wrote something up for the copay assistance to try to get it
yeah,
covered too.
yeah,
But
yeah. I
you
mean,
can't do it with a Medicare disadvantage.
it's so hard. It's like there are some of these plans where it's like, look, we need to like kind of bring better awareness to what people are actually buying because they don't actually know. Like the name is misleading. First of all, it sounds like a government plan. It's not, it's private. Second of all, the name Advantage, is a complete misnomer and not true because they're going to code you with so much risk that the plan makes the money and then they deny all your care and then you can't actually get the care for the diseases that you now have. And then if you wanted to go back to traditional Medicare, I believe you're now subject to underwriting because
You
they've
are, and
now
you'll never
they
make it back.
you'll
You'll
never
never
make it
make it
back.
cross. Yeah, Medicare Advantage is such a scam. It's neither Medicare nor an advantage to any patient. So, that's a whole nother day though. But yeah, I mean, the experience that your team had in the office
Yeah.
and the bonding that went between your team and my patients and between your team and my team was beautiful. It was an amazing experience.
I mean, it was probably like, um, I would say definitely the best experience of building this company was like getting to connect with you all and with patients and see Steve and get to work alongside you guys and support the care that you're providing to the community, because I think people don't understand it, right? And I think it gets lost in the noise. And I can tell you that, like, we tried like hell to get NYT and others to like pick up Overturned. And we couldn't get them to believe that this was a real like national story until, until like recent events, shall we say, without getting deeply into that. But like, it's bizarre to me that like the kind of struggles with deep within these communities are just completely missed.
I've reached out to every local news network to try to get coverage in our office, and they just don't even respond. And it's like, this could be this could be a job changing story for you. And
Yeah.
just no response.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I think part of
we
it's the
managed to get
elite
some.
media, don't you think it's elite media that they're bought and paid for?
I think it depends. So Wendell just had an op-ed in NYT today, which talks about like how like why he quit Cigna, which is great. So I'm glad they printed that,
Okay.
because that makes sense. The Andrew Whitty op-ed in NYT, like of course they're going to print that because it gets some readership. Like I read that and I was like,
I
okay,
urge you to tone out the critical noise of people needing healthcare, Warris.
That's what
yeah,
Whitty said.
yeah, and it's just bonkers. Washington Post is owned by Bezos. Bezos has definitely been putting a thumb on the scales with regards to like what the editorial board's allowed to do. The LA Times is owned by Patrick Soon-Shin, who's a very strange guy. And he's also had his thumb on the scale of stories that go against his particular ideology. So like, it's hard to believe that you're going to get much coverage. And I met with someone who works on an insurer PR external response team, and they were telling me that effectively they're leaning, like the big insurers are leaning on media to not cover right
Oh,
now.
I'm
One
sure.
of my favorite things about yours is I'm good at being a private investigator. I can find things, but you can go even farther and you know their IP address, their third cousin, and any way to get a hold of them. It's absolutely incredible. I think that's what I told Julie too. I was like, this guy can find things. Like I'm a crazy ex-girlfriend and he's going farther than I can find.
I mean, thanks. I got like really, I mean, Scott Galloway talks about your 40s and 50s as being like a period in your life where you're like riddled with anxiety, but he describes it as like a productive anxiety. So in building this company, I would try and confine like my absolute panic about being wrong about the hypothesis of a company, which if you're in any way scientific, you have to embrace being like the possibility that you're wrong, because you've got to run experiments and kind of see what the data tells you, right? Um, I would try and confine it to the hours of like 4 and 5 a.m. So I would sit there and I would just like research deeply who these humans are. I would go through Federal Election Committee filings. I would go through property tax records, DUIs,
My favorite.
yeah, like I would like find all of these humans. I built this giant Rolodex of all of these insurance humans, and sure, like there are some flawed individuals working in the industry, shall we say, in positions of power. Um,
Who's the
but it's
alcohol?
just,
Patrick Conway's the alcoholic. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, you know
he got
what? I
promoted
mean, that's what,
Allegedly.
well, whatever.
allegedly.
There's
Allegedly.
nothing allegedly about his DWI. It's all over the news. Yeah, Patrick Conway's, is the chief medical officer of Optum. Hey, buddy. I just, what is astonishing to me is that the people have swallowed these double-digit premium increases and been saddled with more and more.
Sure.
I don't know. Do you see that changing in the future? I would have told you 3 months ago it wasn't going to change in my lifetime, but now after the current events, I think it might change in my lifetime, Warris.
Well, I went to see Interstellar last night at the IMAX because it was out for the 10-year re-release. And there's a great scene where Matthew McConaughey is trying to dock with this space station that's spinning out of control, whatever. And the robot says to him, it's impossible. And he's like, no, it's necessary. And I'm like, that's kind of how I feel about healthcare reform. Like for so long, everybody has basically said it's impossible. And, we tried to build an explorer of campaign finance in time for the election, so people could explore the down ballot races to see who's taking money from all of your brand name favorite insurer PBMs. And the answer is it's everyone. So it wouldn't have actually helped anyone because everyone's effectively on the take. So it's kind of like, I think there's only like one person who very predictably hasn't taken money from any insurer ever, and you could probably guess who that is.
Who?
Bernie.
Bernie?
Bernie Sanders is, as far as I can tell, the only person who has not taken money from like any of any of these people ever. Like
Yeah.
if you go to Open Secrets and you explore it, yeah, like there are no campaign finance donations. It's all grassroots. So like, look, the people are unhappy. I think that's coming across. It's not noise. Like there's actual real pain in the signal that really comes from like, the stories which you see every day in your office. Like you see people coming in, they can't get medication they need. They then can't work. If they can't work, they can't earn money. If they can't earn money, they can't feed their families, and eventually they lose their jobs. Then they don't have insurance. I mean, this is like not a good situation. People are telling those stories today. I will tell you that like I've been talking to like one major media outlet. I found a human that cares that has been interviewing patients, and some that you know of, right? And in fact, maybe two major media outlets. But yeah, I mean, I stand ready to talk to CNN or whoever on the consequences of this. But as of right now,
So CNN, Fox 2, any national news, any
yeah,
world news, if you want to pick
Local
this up.
news.
I mean, globally, it needs to know there's problems globally, but even just in America, pick it up if you know what you're doing.
Well,
but
so
the time's now, Julie, to answer your point, like the time is
yeah.
now, right? Like this is the same argument that gets used every time there's a school shooting, and there was one just the other day, but there's like it's not the time to talk about, gun safety or anything else. There's the insurance lobby saying it's not the time to talk about insurance reform. It's like, actually, no, it's the exact right time to talk about it. Like we all acknowledge that like what happened was terrible in a sense and shouldn't be the answer. This shouldn't be the answer to like go and, do something awful. Um, However, it does surface these very real feelings of resentment that everybody's been living in, like deep in the texture of everyday American life. And like, I feel like we got to change it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that what Claimable is doing with the patient appeal is the best solution I've ever seen. Because those three people, those three patients, those three souls that were in the overturned video, each and every one of those were cases that were unresolvable by me, and think I'm pretty darn good. And I love to have the combination of the patient story and the late great Steve Bach in that. And it works. And I only do stuff that works. So what is the next step for Claimable? Where are we going next with this?
Yeah, I think that is the question. Broader is the answer. So, starting to support more appeal types, investigations like, MRIs, CTs, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of features which are being added on the provider side to make it more usable by offices, because like, look, there's a famous saying in technology, which is, look, if you're not a little bit embarrassed by your first release, you waited too long. So you like it's said another way, the perfect is the enemy of the good. So we launched really quickly. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, from when we did the appeals clinic in June to when we launched was like 2 to 3 months, and we rebuilt the entire product, and the product got 5 times bigger. So, and so there was a lot of breadth added. and now we need to like make it a little bit deeper in certain areas. We want to add in more appeal strategies for things like white bagging, which are a real problem, and just like have that codified as its own reason. Well, I've also spoken to a lot of doctors' offices who are struggling to get paid post facto, like after like they've infused care, infused a medication. They're being asked to take a big L from, you know, the insurance company, and that's something that is hard for them to swallow. I want to add more support for that. And we just want to use AI across the product. And I think, look, there are companies out there who are saying they use AI for, you know, every type of appeal. You've seen what happens when you do that. You start getting errors in the letters, and these letters are like, you know, part of someone's like record. Like you're using up a chance they have of getting of getting a denial overturned. I've made errors. You know, I've made errors, but they've been either because I didn't know something at the time, which wasn't obvious, but you want to avoid scaling those kinds of errors if you've got the route to doing so. But we've got an approach that we think probably in like the first few months of 2025, and you know, Zach and Alicia will get very upset at me for saying this, but like we should be able to expand this much quicker to like have the AI just acting on all sides of the product to like really help inform the user experience, which right now is taking me a tremendous amount of time to like just dig in. So we'll be able to, I think the validation cycles will be a lot quicker and expanding that. So then we'll, you know, right now we're working in migraine, rheumatology, UC, Crohn's, PANS and PANDAS, which we can talk about, but working in those areas. And the appeals are pretty damn good. I think what I want to make sure is that we maintain that bar of quality. And we think we've got a way of one, making the letters better, which Zach is like, he's taken no paternity leave. He had another kid, like his wife had a kid like very recently. And he's taken zero pat leave. He's been like heads down working really hard on like making sure these are as good as possible. And the design team basically are really annoyed with me because I keep expanding our scope, but it's going great. So like the plan is to just make it bigger and help more patients, because I think the screw has turned, that people are realizing that they don't have to live with this. They don't have to live with these denials. They can push back and they might win.
They'll probably win. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that it's a game changer to have a patient appeal, and what you've built is really an amazing tool for the physician's office. And the physician's offices, they don't have the bench strength to do this. It's exhausting and it's hard to do this. And if we can kind of connect that, I also feel like if there's a way to socialize the patient appeal, meaning market it, meaning
Yeah.
email it from the doctor's
That's coming.
office. Yeah, because I think that I'm getting cases overturned that don't need a patient appeal because they're tired of me.
Well, didn't a certain insurer that will remain nameless basically tell you to quit bugging them because they were receiving so many claimable appeals that they were just like, go away now, we'll just approve everything?
Right. You have a permanent appeal. Yeah. What? Like, okay. So that was a first, but you know, I mean, look, every one of us is a patient. Every one of us has delayed and denied care. And if I didn't know about a patient appeal and the power of it 9 months ago, we need to just get this information out to physicians' offices, to patients, to everyone, because that is your secret sauce. It's a game changer and it works. So yeah.
I got some questions for you guys.
Sure.
Claudia, what are you seeing on social media, and like what's changing in your world, like post all of this kind of craziness?
A lot of people are acknowledging that they're experiencing the same thing, and they are wanting, like, they're sharing their stories. It's happening. I mean, the one, you're claimable, we posted it on our TikTok. It's got, I think, 21,000 views, and everyone on there has asked, like, please give us more of this. Like, it's giving us hope. This is giving us hope.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things that I think that TikTok has brought, is you can just go through and see stories of people being screwed, abused by the healthcare system. I mean, it's like a terrible abusive boyfriend. They don't call you back. They don't answer. They lead you astray. And you've educating
and
them.
They drain your bank account.
Right. And then, right. And educating them with the fact that they're able to appeal on their own. Like you've been on our
Yeah.
TikTok multiple times explaining it, and people are
Yeah.
actually writing to their insurance company or calling it and like commenting. Someone commented and said, "You guys saved me $46,000 because whenever I called, I didn't know what to do about this, and you guys said call and do a patient appeal." And he's like, "It was
Oh,
the last day to do it, and it got approved."
so can I take you through two completely nonsensical denials I've seen lately? Because I think they're really interesting. So there's a young woman in Kansas City. I think you've seen this case, Caitlin C. I think she's 23. She's a medical student, and she has a rare condition called idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. And that means that it basically means no one knows why, but you end up with very low platelets. Platelets are essential for clotting. And if you have very low platelets, then you're at risk of spontaneous bleeding. That would be bad. And that can lead to things like hemorrhagic strokes and all sorts of other things. Basically, bad, bad. And she's on Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City. So she's on the Kansas side of the border. And they're they denied her access to a medication called Promacta. And that's like an $8,000 out of pocket per month, I think, for her. So I helped her write formulary exception request. And this isn't something that I did claimable. Like, you guys know that if someone comes to me with like a case that's like ridiculously difficult, like I'm just going to try and help.
Yeah.
So
You'll
like
manually
I'll
do
try
it.
Every single time.
Right.
I'll try and like take it on. And so, I've had like patients come to me with like stage 4 cancer, like transplant, like other things.
I've
And I've just
tagged you
like,
in a couple of TikToks where they're like,
yeah,
just get me in contact with someone that
yeah.
can help. And I'm like, I got this friend, here he is.
I'll like go to bat. I'll go to bat. So I went to bat for her, and she got denied yesterday by their general counsel, who I won't name because I don't want to target individual executives, but like in any way. But like they sent her a denial, which was like incredibly demeaning. It was unbelievably the way it was worded. It said something like, "You feel your case is medically necessary." So it's like, no, she has platelets. She has platelets in her boots. Like the lab called and like, "Hey, we've got your one platelet. Would you like it back?" That is not a feeling.
Right.
That is not opinion. That is fact. Like she literally meets your criteria. And they said that formulary, you were contractually excluded from access to tier 2, tier 3 drugs under your plan. So you're not eligible to a formulary exception request, which is insane because what's the point of having insurance if you would have foreknowledge of any condition you might develop at the time you purchase insurance, then it wouldn't really be insurance. It would just be a rainy day fund. But it doesn't make sense. So like she tried everything on their formulary. She's been on like different types of steroids. Still, this problem is still happening. Um, and they're now saying, well, you can't have an exception for Promacta, which I think is just nuts. So, she sent them a very, curt email back, like suggesting that the denial is circular because it's basically saying you can't appeal because it's not on our formulary, and we won't do a formulary exception because it's not on our formulary. But the reason why you would do a formulary exception is because it's not in your formulary. Like, how stupid do you need to be? But anyway, I think the Department of Insurance in Kansas has picked it up. They picked up the appeal, and they're gonna like, go ask some very inconvenient questions of the folks at Blue Cross Blue Shield Kansas City, as they should. Like, I don't think you're allowed to offer protections lower that are in the Affordable Care Act. Not a lawyer, but pretty sure that's the case, that the ACA set out a minimum standard.
So this is a medical student, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's gonna spend her
So,
career helping people.
I want to talk about that 8-year-old that can't get an IVIG treatment.
does she still denied?
Oh, Emily. So this is a UHC case where
And UHC is United Health Cartel for the listeners?
it is United.
Okay.
It is United Healthcare have been all over the news. And look, despite recent events, the sad thing is that there's like no evident self-reflection on thinking about like, why are people so angry? Why is this outpouring of vitriol on social media? It's like, well, because you're spending a lot of time like issuing reflexive denials from people who don't have the medical expertise to, you know, deny this patient. Like they're not in the same specialty, they don't have experience in practice, you know, etc. This kid is still waiting on approval from UHC, and you know, this will be probably a major media story in the coming week, I
Well,
would
it's just
say.
disgusting because she's 8 years old. What 8-year-old wants an IVIG treatment, first off? Secondly,
Yeah,
how, like, I've seen you post constantly about it, and it's almost like the forces of TikTok are just, you have 36 views. Why?
I know. I
There's
don't
no
know.
reason why.
I do not know. The algorithm is suppressing it, but it is interesting. And the other piece that I find very, you know, sad for this family is that they, you know, they live in a state where there is no care for PANS, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. It's basically you get an infection as a kid, could be numerous types, and then it causes you to basically develop this severe type of almost autistic, psychiatric behavior. Like it's very distressing for parents, very distressing for the kids. These kids go from being like, you know, straight A students to barely being able to write their name. And,
Mhm.
you know, anyway, they have to drive 9 hours to get care for their daughter because there is no care in state that will accept them, which is really concerning. So they're in this kind of terrible position. But yeah, I'm going to bat for them every single day, and you know we'll get them overturned. Like UHC will roll over because the backlash is just going to be absolutely enormous if they don't. There've been like, you know, there have been like people who are very well known, shall we say, who've all been quite reticent to like go public on the case in the wake of like recent events. Um, but I think they're realizing um, they're realizing that like nothing's changed, and actually that there's like no reason to like stay on the sidelines at this point.
Yeah, I read an article that says that said United Healthcare employs 440,000 people. Like what? How can they have employed 440,000 people essentially to deny care? Because that's the majority of what they're doing. I mean, they acted like, oh, we really reduced the prior authorizations. No, they didn't. They reduced the prior authorizations of some really rinky-dink inexpensive generics, certainly not in rheumatology. None of that happened in rheumatology. We still get 12-page prior authorizations for inexpensive drugs. But I mean, I think the days of them putting out propaganda, insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers putting out propaganda that they're lowering the cost of healthcare are over. And they've been
Right.
over for a while, but now everybody's wise to their game. Um, so I hope that Emily's case gets overturned. I hope that all these cases get overturned.
I'm gonna do everything in my power to help. We
Same.
talked
I mean,
about
like
it
I think
yesterday.
Yeah.
we beat a case at another insurer yesterday for PANS where the insurer used an adult emergency medicine physician to review a pediatric care case. Like, and that's just like and a PANS case, and you're like, okay, this family don't want to be public, but like, you know, it was kind of crazy that like that would they wouldn't have spotted that in the like denial letter that like the specialty reviewing physician was actually like not specialty matched at all, probably doesn't see a lot of like 10-year-olds or whatever. Like that's it's just it's very strange that this practice is still going on. I will say on what you're saying about prior auth, hmm, how would I put this? There is. I was speaking to someone the other day, and I just want to be careful how we say this. That I was speaking to someone the other day who was telling me that the numbers of denials they may not be going up optically, but there's a game being played currently where the denials are being targeted, and they think they can mathematically prove it. They think the denials are being targeted to people who are less likely to appeal and physicians' offices who are less likely to appeal. And so, whilst say the denial rate, like make it up, say it's 20%, right? Whilst the denial rate stays at 20%, far fewer of those will ever get appealed because they're targeting them at the pool that will never appeal. So it's actually more profitable for, you know, Acme Insurance Company, for like not wanting to be sued for defamation, to do this. And so that's what's happening. So it's interesting. There'll be more in that soon. Like that's something that we're going to be working on, kind of exposing in the public eye. But yeah, I mean, there needs to be just a lot more transparency. There needs to be more accountability from the insurance side. You know, Julie, you and I have talked about this for a long time. Like, if there is a move to single payer in this country right now, the way that the regulations and the government has been configured has been that would just be called United Healthcare.
Nobody's going to stand for that anymore, though. That ship sailed on December 4th. Nobody's going to
Yeah,
stand for United Healthcare for all, because nobody trusts them. And that's the whole craziness. There is no trusted relationship between the patient and the insurance company, because they don't do basic things like show up and answer the phone and or be reasonable. That is why we are here. That is why you have Claimable, is because the trust has gone out of healthcare a couple decades ago.
it's gone out. Look, I mean, look, we got to an insane position, right? And where we had to build this company, which was like not something I'd like really intended to do. Like if I think back to my career like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I never thought I'd be doing this. But it's necessary, right? Like this has not been solved. And we've created a permission structure in healthcare where no one does anything, because because you like, who do you have to talk to? You've got to talk to like Marty McCary, or, you know, who's going to give you permission to do anything? You talk to the supposed experts and they don't really advocate for this kind of change. They advocate for like entirely different change, which I don't know is helpful. So we kind of end up in this position where therefore everyone just kind of moves to like this learned helplessness. We do this predominantly because the best way today for a denied case to be reviewed by a human is by you submitting an appeal with AI, which is insane, right? I recognize the absurdity of that statement, but I'll say it again. If you want your care to be reviewed by a human with a pulse, you probably need to submit an appeal via an AI,
Yeah.
right? Because it's the only way you're going to be able to conquer the knowledge asymmetry that lives between you and the insurer. That is, you have to know the clinical evidence, their criteria for approval. You know, there's a bunch of stuff you've got to be able to weave into it, which is just going to be too hard for a sick patient to do otherwise. So that's what we built. We think it's useful. I'm sorry in a way that it needs to exist. This is not an ideal state of affairs. We want to see the world change, and I want to see it change in my lifetime.
Well, I think you're well on your way to doing that. I mean, you're doing great work, and I find it very interesting that insurance companies are potentially targeting certain zip codes, shall we say. God
Yeah.
knows my practice would be in that zip code, because I've got patients that don't have the means to fight these. And so I think that, you know, the three of us are just born fighters and born like, hold on a second, I can help you, you can help me. You know, you asked Claudia, what are you seeing on social media? When I watched the Overturn piece, which was filmed on June 26th of 2024,
Right.
I talk about she has 17,000 followers on her TikTok channel. How many do we have today? 48,000.
Wow.
So we've gone from 17,000 in late June of 2024 to 48,000 followers. We must be doing something right.
I think I've got like 150.
I tag you and stuff. I'm working on it.
Well, you know what?
I know.
Claimable. It's tagged in my last TikTok. It's also tagged all over the time. Warris, follow him also.
I'm going to be sharing a lot more patient stories on TikTok because I think it matters. So, you know,
Yeah.
I think like these stories need to be told. So we'll see how this
They
goes.
absolutely need to be told. And we've actually been on TikTok the whole time, in addition to recording this for our podcast. So you know what? There is people out there that more people are like the three of us than like the insurance companies. We've all got
Yeah.
delayed and denied care, or we've had a family member or a friend who
Yeah.
has been screwed by their insurance company, and patient appeals are where it's at. I am 100% sold on this. So I feel like if we can just get some synergy and get the right people to beat the drum. Well, you've got Wendell Potter. It just makes my heart so full when I see him on the news and all the press he's getting. Nobody is a finer example of doing the next right thing than Wendell Potter. And
Wendell has a ton of integrity. Like I think he's got like a very like quiet stoicism, which I really love about him. And just a deep sense of like right and wrong. And he can't be bought. And I think that's a thing that you realize. And that was something, you know, Wendell and I, it's funny, I read his book, Deadly Spin. I was like, I'd say I listened to a lot of audiobooks, like when I was running a ton in the last year. And I was like listening to his book, and like we had very similar upbringings actually. It's kind of interesting. Like we both grew up in like very working class families. We both did well relative to like, you know, other members of our family. Like we were able to go to college and whatever. And then we both ended up working in insurance. And then we both left out of like effectively a state of like, I can't do this anymore. And I went to insurance out of like this like, I mean, effectively, what I was promised was like, hey, we get to change all of insurance. Like, we get to change the, you know, the third largest carrier in the country to being more modern, more patient focused. I'm like, that's amazing. I want to build programs that actually solve access issues for, you know, marginalized families, like much like the family I grew up in, where if I was in this country, we would absolutely have been Medicaid and we absolutely would have gone bankrupt. And it was like a subconscious thing for me of like wanting to like spend more time serving that population. So like I spent a lot of time building those things. We built them, we proved that they worked, but we couldn't get anyone inside of the company to care. They just wanted to like sign the contracts for, you know, whichever Medicaid you know, business they were getting from whatever state. They didn't care at all about like deploying the program at scale. At least that was the impression that I walked away with. And it just ultimately wasn't a way that I could continue to make money. So I'm very happy to like earn 10 times less and be extremely focused on like doing the right thing by patients, because ultimately that's the only thing that matters. Like it's just not going to happen in any of these big companies. I've been everywhere. I've been in every single one of these like giant companies, whether it's like Apple or Amazon or Anthem or GE, and they all have like good points and bad points. I will say this, which will be very controversial. Anthem is a better employer than Amazon. Amazon is like awful to its people, like just unbelievably awful. Um, but I wouldn't want to work at any of those companies ever again, because they're not really indexed on solving problems that matter. And these problems happen in the here and now. They happen every day in your office. Claudia, you've got people probably reaching out to you every day asking for help also. So
Well, and also I think with the documentary overturned,
yeah.
we've got people saying, when's the next installment? Can I be in it? Can I tell my story? Like people want to speak up because they've been silenced for so long. And I think the three of us also have stories that when you've walked through some crummy stuff, like people do, it changes who you are. And for me, I am a better person because you are in my life and you, because we've all collectively have this like giant paddle that we're rowing for the shore with an army of patients behind us.
And I will say this to you both, like this, people who solve this problem, like people who care about solving this problem, I think like attracts like. There are not a lot of like super disingenuous people in this area. I think there are some people who might be a little bit misguided on like the way they go about it, maybe, right? But they're going to learn. But they're ultimately, the reason they came into it is because they see an inequality and they want to solve it. And they don't see anyone else doing it, right? There are a lot of talking heads saying that it's important and should be solved, but there's a lot of people on the ground, you know, who like the Health Advocate Summit people, like Melissa, for example, she's on the ground trying to help patients. There, you know, Nilsa is on the ground trying to help patients. There are a ton of people who are working with patients every day. We all might have slightly different approaches. Like Julie, you get called out for being like more combative than some. That's your way of getting it done. And look, for the most part, it's super effective.
Yeah, well, it takes a village. I'm grateful, Warris, you're in my village.
Same.
I'm grateful Claudia's in my village. We're gonna end there, and GetClaimable.com is where you can find Warris's company. It is changing how patients get approved care, and it has got the seal of approval of this little girl.
It's coming from somebody that's seen all sides of healthcare, literally has lived it,
Yeah.
has worked it, has done everything. So he's coming from all different areas of where the problem is and able to give a different perspective than even Julie and I would be able to give.
For sure, for sure.
Well, thank you both for the time. Very much
Of course.
appreciated.
Warris,
And
what's your handle on TikTok and Twitter so we can get our friends out to follow you?
I don't even know.
Oh, well,
there's part of it.
Wait, it's at Warris Bokhari.
It's at Warris Bokhari, and
Okay.
then also it's claimable.com or
It's at GetClaimable, and it's GetClaimable.com.
Yeah, so
So-
Warris Bokhari is W as in Walter, ARRIS, B as in boy, OHAKA.
nope.
Wow.
Yeah, look, it took me
HKARI.
until I was 7 to even be able to spell it. so
Wow,
don't
wow.
worry.
You know what? We're
Be-
gonna put it up in the chat.
It'll be posted in the video,
Yes.
and I urge everyone to follow Warris because he's fighting against some forces
He's the real deal.
with his face shining. He
Fiddlesticks
hasn't
to my
taken his
friend.
photo down yet. I don't think he will. He's a CEO that keeps the photo up, so we appreciate the
Yes,
transparency.
yes, we do.
What's going to happen? All right, I'll talk to you
All
guys.
right.
Much
Bye,
love.
Warris.
Bye. Happy
Warris.
holidays. Bye.
Happy-
You too.
See, and I'm gonna end this. Stop. Are you sure?